It is 7 o'clock. I'm going to call the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen to order. I also am going to ask for a motion to recess until after the conclusion of the public hearing, which we will call to order momentarily. May I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to recess the board of the hearing, the meeting for the board for the hearing, excuse me.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made by Alan, seconded by Marie to recess the special meeting till the conclusion of the public hearing. Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
It is 7:01, so I will call the Board of Selectmen public hearing to order. The purpose of tonight's public hearing is to hear public comments on the Charter Revision Commission's proposed changes to the town charter. This is our second public hearing, the first one being held on July 16th. And we have accepted written comments since that day up until 6 p.m. this evening. I am in possession of 6 pieces of written correspondence that were emailed to members of the board and to our recording secretary. I am not going to read them into the record, but I would encourage you to have taken a look at them. Other than that, we will turn to the
Jason.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, just real quick. There was a duplicate, one individual. I only got 5, so, and I got 2 for the same person.
Hold on a second. I'll share with you specifically. So I have them from a gentleman named Steve Kessler.
Yep. That's the one I got 2.
William,
Yep.
Dave McDade,
Yep. What was that?
Jack Manette.
Yep.
And then I sent a link to the public meeting minutes, which has the last public hearings comments in there.
Yeah, I got those.
Oh, a woman named Nancy Callahan.
Yep, that's all I got. That was it?
So I miscounted.
Okay. I just want to make sure I didn't miss something.
No, it's
That's all right.
I counted the minutes from the last one.
Yep. Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So now, prior to opening up the floor for comment, I would recognize Rebecca Talamini and Tanya. I think Rebecca is the only one on.
Yes, Tanya.
Rebecca has been the co-chair of the Charter Revision in these last 6 months. I'd like to start by thanking Rebecca and the commission for the hard work that they put in a very short period of time, and ask if there are any comments from Rebecca or the members of the commission, and we'd open it up to that, and then I'll open the hearing up to comment from members of the public. Rebecca.
Hello. So before I start, I just wanted to add another communication that I got via the email system, I think. I wasn't sure how that worked if you had also gotten it, Jason, but it's one from Keith Cotton. Do you guys have one from them?
I have not received one from him.
Okay, so I'll just read it really quick that the message is in section 8-5, number 4 of the proposed changes. It says, if the budget fails at the referendum, the budget shall be returned to the Board of Finance to establish and approve a budget for the town. He says that he would rather have it go back to another vote. So I'm just passing along that communication to start.
Thank you.
In terms of what we have done and what we have looked at, we've looked at many different options. In the very beginning of this process, we had worked with Amy O'Toole, the town treasurer, to have us kind of run some numbers based on the budgets in the past. As you all know, the current process is if it fails after a third referendum, it goes to an automatic 2%. So we had asked Amy to run different numbers with a 2% if the third one fails, but we're going to remove CIP and debt services from that 2%. We also ran an 8% just for a complete random number again, with and without the debt services and CIP. And we also ran a COLA percentage and a 2% tax increase. So those are the numbers that we ran for 4 different years from FY 2017 to FY 2020. And to be completely honest, the numbers were absolutely all over the place. We realized that a lot of the reasons for that is because it depends on the state and federal taxes that we get, or money that we get from those two things. So that it didn't help us pick a perfect resolution by any means, but it kind of helped us to say there is no perfect answer. So with us as the group debating, we had landed on the 3 referendums, and if it fails, then it would go back to the Board of Finance for several different reasons. If anybody from the group wants to kind of chime in on their take on some of those things, Nicole, I know you had some good thoughts you've been sharing the past couple times too, so I just wanted to see if you had anything to share as well.
You mean regarding just the vote for the Board of Finance and how I know that it's not, it's gotten a lot of bad reviews from both the Board of Selectmen and from a lot of people in town. But honestly, and as we had discussed all along and including last night, the Board of Finance is elected by the town for their trust in making those good financial decisions. The reason why we kept it at 3 referendums is we wanted to be able to have a budget in a timely fashion without spending too much money. So there were a lot of different variables that went into our decision. And when we did think about and listen to a lot of different sides of it, but really it made the most sense. And like you said, there was no perfect answer. Nothing we do is going to appease everybody, but responsibly, time-wise, financially, and who gets to make the last call, I felt that this was really the best choice.
Thank you.
Hi, Jim Richards.
Yeah, I think that's Jimbo. Go ahead.
I'm on the commission. I also want to emphasize the fact that we were torn between 3 votes and an end or just keep on voting. A lot of us felt to keep on voting is a better solution than any percentage. Thank you.
The only other person that we have on here is Ruth Ann and Heather from the commission. So if any of those 2 have any opinions they want to share. Ruth Ann's shaking her head, so she's good. Not sure if Heather has anything to chime in on, but those are the opinions from the group. We are certainly open to hearing what other people have to say and what their thoughts are, and hopefully a guidance on where to go from here.
Okay, if there are no further comments from members of the commission, I would open up to comment from members of the public. Are there any members of the public who would like to give their opinion on the recommendations from the Charter Revision Commission? Mr. Stucklin.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Fred Stucklin, 148 Winkler Road, East Windsor. First of all, taking away from the public the capability of voting for a referendum on the tax rate or mill rates and giving it exclusively to the Board of Finance kind of goes against the the charter intent of allowing the people of the town to vote for what they think is necessary or not necessary. That's number one condition. Number two, to change the charter and take that responsibility away from the voters because of timing doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, in that there's better ways of installing better timing. Do it a little bit earlier, and get the public's input earlier. I understand that we've had a public participation issue over the years, but it's important that we work on that to get it to be better in the future. I guess that pretty much sums up where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I saw Noreen Farmer's hand up. Mrs. Farmer?
Hi, it's Noreen Farmer, 247 South Water Street, East Windsor. First of all, I apologize for kind of coming in towards the very end of this. I wish I had been involved a little sooner. Excuse me, I need to get rid of my granddaughter. Go ask mommy for the water, honey. Sorry about that. I spoke last night at the charter meeting as well, and I'm looking at this from a lot of kind of different angles. I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting last week, where there's the issue of people having the right to vote, and I agree people should have a right to vote, and there's the issue of the 2%. I want to kind of come at it from the 2% angle. I served on the Board of Finance for many years back in the early 2000s, before we had the referendum situation. And I'm now serving on the Board of Finance again in an alternate capacity. And I realized this year that there's a vast difference in the entire process from years ago to what we have now. And I think the installation of the referendum, it has a couple of embedded problems with it. Years ago, when we would start the budget process and we would go through everything, it was very much a joint effort among all boards. In the very beginning, there were meetings of the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen with all of the town department heads to discuss what do we think we can accomplish this year. Please try to understand these are where we are. This is where we kind of have to stick to. There was a lot of Board of Finance involvement within the capital improvement program, in the police department, meeting with the police department, meeting on an ongoing basis with the Board of Education, being part of all the contract negotiations. Being on the Board of Finance was intense. It was literally like a job in itself. Because the Board of Finance had the responsibility of understanding where everything was coming from. What did the town side need? What did the education need? What does our public service need? What did our fire departments need? What did we need as far as capital improvements that can't continually be kicked down the road forever and ever and ever? What do we have coming at us from fire trucks getting old? What do we have on roofs falling in? It was very much the Board of Finance worked within everybody's departments to try to have a long-term plan as to where do you progress as a town. A lot of it had to do with the town's plan of conservation and development, which is somewhat set up to guide us through our future. And then when this whole referendum, and back to that, when we would have our public hearings, we would be at the high school and it was packed with people. There were more people at those meetings and it would go hours and hours and hours. And then we would be there until 11, 12 o'clock at night, talking about what it was and what did we see and who wanted what and where did we see where things were falling. And when this referendum thing kicked in, it kind of, all of that seems to have gone away, because we've got this arbitrary 2% number that in no way, shape, or form allows the town of East Windsor to progress at all. We cannot progress as a town at 2% when it is 2% of everything. we can't do capital improvement programs. We can't say, let's look at sewers. We can't say, let's go fix major things, because not only do we not have it in capital improvement, we can't bond it because we have no room in our debt service and to allow us to look at things like that. And I think that 2% arbitrary number kind of just negated everybody's desire or ability to want to participate. It's just, oh, I'm going to go and I'm going to vote no because I don't like my taxes to go up. I'm going to vote yes because I want my taxes to go up, but it's earmarked towards education and the rest of the town, whatever. You know, everybody's got their little pocket. The Board of Finance's part in that is to look at all of the pockets and come up with a plan that's good for the town and try to address it to the town and get them to understand we need to do certain things. And I just feel like any number that it's going to revert back to is never going to allow us to progress. We're always going to be stuck with this. There's the number, that's what it is, and there you go. Now, the Board of Finance never made the final decision. It was always a town meeting. There was always a final vote on it. The Board of Finance, other than I think this year when we were forced to do it, they never made the final decision. It was, okay, that's what we heard, let's work on that, let's go here, let's go back, let's do this. And because it's in the charter, you're stuck with it. And I'm not really sure where you go other than to hope that if you can take the percentage out at least and get it out on a presidential election and get it out there as to why we want to do that, that perhaps that may get people to understand that there's more to it than just a simple, this is the increase, and that you got to look at things from many, many perspectives if we want this town to progress. And I think the town as a whole, be it the Board of Selectmen, be it the Board of Finance, be it the Board of Education, be it the Police Department, all have to explain clearly and as best as they can why they want the things they want, why we think we could have these things. It's a very complex thing to do a municipal budget because there's many, many aspects that people don't think about. It's just a matter of what's my taxes going up. You know, we've got the Board of Selectmen making wonderful strides in trying to get economic development into town, which I'm all for. But if we're stuck at 2%, what's the point? Do we really want to give away all of our land and take open space and make it big old buildings when we're still going to be stuck at 2%? And that part, all of that goes into the thinking of developing a budget. Having the foresight to look down the road 3 and 4 years. These are the things we want to bring in. This is what we do. And because we don't have concrete conversations and we don't have boards working intricately together to have a somewhat common goal, and we're stuck with these things that are in these charters, we're really never going to progress. And I'm hoping that you can, if I don't know about the how many votes it should be or how many votes it shouldn't be, I don't believe it should ever go back to the Board of Finance. I think we have to have a finalized vote from the town, be it referendum, be it town meeting, be it whatever it is. But having this number attached to the budgeting is not allowing us to progress in a good way for any part of our town. It's not helping our education. It's not helping our public service sections. It's not helping us bring in economic development. Because economic development, people who want to come in with businesses, they want to be in a town that's progressing somewhat. They don't want to be in a town that's consistently, well, no, you can't have it just because we don't want it. And I really think that we need to come up with a way to get people back into buildings to have conversation. not just these, it's voting day, I'm gonna go in and vote no, I'm gonna go in and vote yes. And I think we need to get people to be more engaged in the process so that it's not just segments who band themselves together. This year it was education. The Board of Finance got education, 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 and maybe 3 other people saying, we don't want it. That doesn't help either. So it's a very difficult thing, but the percentage number being in there really is just never going to get us to a point where we can progress in any productive, forward-thinking way. So I'm hoping that you can, if nothing else, try to get that out of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Noreen. Other members of the public who would like to address the board on the proposed amendments to the charter? Other comment from members of the public? I see Roseanne's iPad hand is up. If you please give
Hi,
address.
my name is Roseanne Wilcox. I'm from 7 Kevin Drive. Can you hear me? Because I'm new at this, so I'm not sure what I'm doing, so bear with me.
You're doing fine.
I'm a senior citizen, and I live in the Warehouse Fire District. I'm already paying extra. I agree with the gentleman that just spoke. The 2% is not the answer. But if we're going to have a referendum and you ask for our opinion, I don't think it should then revert back to the finance board. I think we just need to keep working on a plan that would be acceptable to everybody, whether it takes more referendums or more discussions. But to just say you get 3 shots and we don't like your answer, we're going to, if we say no, and then you say, okay, I'm going to finance board anyways, what good is our referendums?
Thank you, Roseanne. Any other comments from members of the public?
I saw Bob Leach had his hand up right before you had called on his hand.
Mr. Leach?
Hello, Bob Leach, 39 Church Street. Of course, I agree with everybody else's comments about the 2%. We need to get rid of that, first of all. But in my opinion, I would agree with the previous speaker. After 3 votes and then handing it off to the Board of Finance for them to set the budget, I don't believe reflects the voters' vote. So my opinion, I would rather see we vote until we pass the budget. I believe we've had, one occurrence where we've had multiple referendums. I don't believe we're going to see that again. I don't think the people involved in those years when that happened are still with us in the capacity that they were. I think there's more people involved in the process now, and more people that are better educated about our budget as we cast our ballots on the referendum, that I believe we could come to a consensus and pass a budget by simply letting us vote for it. Just my opinion. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from members of the public? Any other comments from members of the public?
Jason, Tom Lansner. I don't know if you can see my hand up.
I could not. Mr. Lansner, how are you?
Thanks. Tom Lansner, 27 Laurel Circle. I know the 2% is a blessing and a curse. The only concern I have is if we vote until the budget passes, would it be possible that the only budget that's going to pass is going to be less than 2%? So if we no longer have that threshold and we had a very aggressive voting population that did not want an increase, we might end up with a budget that's less than 2%. Just my concern.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from members of the public? Any other comments from members of the public? Mr. Leach, for the second time.
Thanks for hearing me again. I know people have a concern that it'll go to multiple referendums and we could get to a budget that's zero, but I don't believe that will happen. I just don't see it happening. Then again, is there anyone that could tell me when we had more than 3 referendums? And if you give me the amount of times this has happened, I don't recall clearly on that. I want to say it was one time we had gone to like 6 referendums, and that's what spurred this whole 2% and the charter change. I think it's pretty rare occurrence. So if somebody could give me that information, that would be great, and it'd be great to share with the public. And then again, one other point I wanted to add was most other towns that are governed by town meeting, board of selectmen, I would say probably the majority of those towns don't have these silly implications in their charter where they're stuck at a percentage or a certain amount of referendums and it changes to X. I think if you look at the majority of towns, they vote until they pass a budget, and I think that's really the way to go.
Thank you, sir. I saw Mr. Towers with his hand up.
Bill Towers, 14 Maple Avenue, Broadbrook. I'm not sure if you can hear me. I got pretty bad service down here at the campground. I just want to talk about that 2% briefly. I think the 2%, it really hurts our ability to bond, borrow, and even plan for future projects. I just really think that, and it really doesn't matter to me if we have a referendums until it passes, or if it just gets sent to a town meeting. But that automatic 2% really cripples our town. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments from members of the public? Nicole?
Yeah, first I wanted to clarify that nobody is for keeping the 2%. That is something that we're definitely going to be taking care of this year. Another thing I wanted to bring to light is that there was no talk about referendum limits until it came to our attention that when the budget gets held up, departments don't get money. Departments like the Board of Ed and our children starting school. So, you know, this is where we kind of have to pick the lesser of two evils in the way of this. So I just wanted to let you guys know that that's where that came from.
Other comments from members of the public? Other comments from members of the public? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion from a member of the Board of Selectmen to close the public hearing.
Selectman Nordell will move to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made by Charlie, seconded by Alan to close the public hearing. All those in favor, Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Public hearing is adjourned at 7:29 p.m. I'll reconvene the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen at 7:29 p.m. This portion of the, our next item of business is to move on to the Pledge of Allegiance. And bear with me one moment. I would call on Selectman Baker to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. Part of it, but you get the idea.
Sorry, I've been muted for a little while. All members of the Board of Selectmen are present, so I'll move on to agenda item number 4, which is public participation. This is the public's opportunity to address the Board of Selectmen on items on our agenda, which is limited to the charter revision proposals. Since we just did that, I'm not sure there's going to be a lot of that, but I would open it up to the public for any comment. Noreen, is your finger up?
It is Noreen Farmer, 247 South Water Street. After listening to the rest of the conversations, I have one thing to add. You guys need to make a recommendation tonight to the charter revision, who needs to make a decision to follow you or go with what they want. I think the most important thing is to get the 2% situation taken care of, because if it fails, if we go in with something and it fails, we still have the 2%. The charter doesn't get changed. It reverts to its original state and it stays the way it is. So in your processing, I hope that you will try to come up with a plan to hopefully come up with something that we can get rid of the 2%, or any arbitrary number. And if you got to live with some other things for the time being, that number is not sustainable any longer. So you have to take in consideration if it gets voted down, we're stuck where we are, and you either have to do another charter next year or you got to wait 5 years, and we can't do 5 more years of this. You're gonna have a roof fall in, and we don't have any money to pay for it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Any other comments from members of the public? Any other comment from members of the public? This will be the public's last opportunity to address the board before we consider the comments from the Charter Revision Commission. I see Mr. Leach's hand. The floor is yours, sir.
Just my last comment. You have one chance to do this year. My recommendation, get rid of the 2%, go to a referendum until it passes. What have you got to lose? I'm pretty sure if you tie the Board of Finance setting the budget after 3 referendums, I'm pretty sure it's not going to pass. Just my thoughts.
Okay, so that's off. Your video is off, so you should be able to hear sound.
Hi, Mr. Talamini.
Hi, Jason. Mute me, please.
Before I do that, sir, we're just about to end the public participation section of the Board of Selectmen's special meeting. Do you have any comments for the board?
I'm all set.
I'm going to mute you. Okay, so this part of the meeting is limited to the 5 members of the Board of Selectmen. I want to start by sharing with you where we are in terms of the process. Connecticut General Statute 7-191C in pertinent part says, if the appointing authority makes recommendations for changes in the draft report to the commission shall confer with the appointing authority concerning any such recommendations and may amend any provisions of the proposed charter amendments, or home rule ordinance amendments in accordance with such recommendations, or the commission may reject such recommendations. In this case, we are the appointing authority, so we can make recommendations to the Charter Revision Commission for future action, and they can decide either to accept our proposals, amend our proposals, or reject our proposals, and then send a final draft report back to us. So that is where we stand in terms of the process. The statutory citation is 7-191 subsection C. Comments from members of the board on what we've read and what we've heard? Don't make me call on somebody. Marie.
I'll go first. A lot of the narrative and a lot that I heard, not only July 16th, but last night's charter revision meeting, is that majority that spoke don't want it to go back to the Board of Finance. Having been on the Board of Finance as chairman when budgets were failing and failing and failing one year, I was given information from the town attorney that says the Board of Finance, after so many failures, Board of Finance can then take and make a decision. We had taken the budget and brought it as low as that we could go. To go to another budget and have it failed, we would have done harm to the town. So I made the decision along with the Board of Finance. And I say I take responsibility for that decision because I'm the one that was in the role to finalize it. We chose to set the budget for the town. And to this day, I think I did what was in the best interest of the town from a financial standpoint, but I did harm and I disrespected those voters in the town of East Windsor that care enough about the town to come out and vote. And I took that right away from them. And I regret that one time. So send back to the Board of Finance and take the vote away from the public. I don't think we're doing our community any justice. What I'd like to do is take the 2% out. I think everything that Noreen Farmer has said, everything that I've heard Paul Anderson speak on the other day, and continuing, our bonding is affected. Our growth is affected by that 2%. So I would like to go back to keep on voting as the charter revisions, but understand that's the route that they've decided to go, and let it go. We have a Board of Finance. If there's some things that need to be re-looked at and put out there, we have to do a better job of getting out information. I'm little disgruntled with a few people that have their opinion, and they're certainly entitled to their opinion. But when half the information gets out and the other half is just hearsay, we're not doing the town any disservice. So, and I think we did a better job this year to get out information, but I think we still should do a lot more than what we're doing in order to get information out to the public and let them understand what the budget cycle is and what the future for East Windsor holds. We're going through a lot of rough times now with the pandemic, other things that are happening, and people are concerned financially. I get that, but you still have to run a town, whether we like it or not, or we don't get the roads plowed, we don't get our trash picked up. I don't want to see anything eliminated. So I'm hoping that if we do our jobs the right way and the Board of Finance gets the information out like we all need to do better than what we've had in the past, and I'm not saying that we haven't done a good job. I think we have to do better based upon what's happening. I think the voters will vote based upon the right thing. And if they don't, it'll be what it is. That's all I got.
Sarah, I saw your hand up.
Give me 1 second. I just gotta
Yep.
get this off. Not gonna do that, but I just wanted to say that I agree that the 2% has really hindered our growth and our ability to bond with the with having capital improvement and debt service part of that 2%. So I'd really like to see that removed. I had sent an email in case I couldn't speak because I have another meeting at the same time. But I have a few different options that I'd like the board to possibly consider. One being that we continue to vote like previous members of the public and Marie had stated until it does pass. Another option might be the 2% plus the inflation rate for that year. Another one based on the gross national product. And I think those were the options I had. But I would hate to see us just pull a percentage number out of thin air without any basis and insert that. To me, that would not be us moving forward. But I do appreciate the comments from the public. I do agree with if we're going to have 3 referendums and people are going to come out to vote and then the Board of Finance is just going to set the budget anyway, to me, it doesn't make sense to have people come out and vote. To me, it's like taking away their voice when they're opposed to it, and I just don't agree with that. So those were just some options that I thought we could consider. I do appreciate the work that the Charter Revision Commission did. I know they did go back and forth on this quite often, but that's just my feelings on it.
Thank you. Gentlemen. I saw Charlie unmute first.
Selectman Nordell here. So I've been very torn on this. I was very adamant to go with Charter Revision's recommendation. You know, I think we had selected a great group. I think they had done awesome work on this and had really done a good job with what they had presented. And until recently, I was very much willing to continue to go with their recommendation. However, I've decided I'm not going to do like the last board of selectmen did, and with the last charter revision and the public's input, and that was to just completely ignore it and do as we wish. So I agree the 2% needs to be eliminated, and I'm all for that. But taking away the vote after 3, my argument before was, well, the Board of Finance are also elected officials, and we entrusted them with our budget, and therefore we should trust them to set it if need be. The public was given 3 opportunities to set the budget, and they obviously couldn't agree on it. So I figured at that point, 3 times a charm, you can't make it happen, give it to someone else to make it happen. And that was my perspective on it. But the public doesn't want that, so I'm not going to go with that. My opinion is only one, and we're here to serve the public, so I'm going to agree that, you know, we take away the 2%, but we do something else as far as voting, whether it's continue until it passes. Maybe that's the best solution. It just scares me as to the financial burden and what could happen when school starts and things like that, and we still don't have a budget passed. But I think we can take a shot at it. I think it's, like Bob Leach said, you know, it's worth a try.
Selectman Baker.
Yeah, so I did speak a little bit about this at our meeting last week, so I think people kind of know where I stand basically, but you know, I want to start by saying I dislike the 2%. I dislike that our budgets get set to 2%. But the reason why they get set to 2% is not because it's, you know, arbitrary that it would be that way. It's because people don't come out to vote for anything more than that. They know in our town you can vote no 3 times and set the budget to 2%. So I think that my concern is that if we took away that fail-safe, what you would really get in actuality is a 4th vote that went lower and a 5th vote that went lower, that kind of a thing. You would potentially find a lot of budgets throughout the years being less than 2%. And I think that's because the people that get out to vote tend to want to spend less. And so if you could imagine, say, 2 or 3 years in a row of 1%, what would our education system look like? So it's a concern. And I do understand 2% is not adequate. A lot of us think that, apparently, not a majority of us though, because we tend to get a 2% most years. So I just think it's a little bit of wishful thinking to think that we could get rid of this 2%, go to unlimited voting, and then end up where we want to end up. I don't see any evidence to support that. I mean, everybody's made good comments and I think they're coming from good places, but the track record of this town is what it is. The 2% was put in there for a reason, and I imagine that reason was we were getting budgets less than 2% and it wasn't cutting it, and we were running into trouble. I mean, we just have a 20 years of lack of investment in this town at a minimum, and so I think that if we were just to rip it out, we could end up in a worse situation than we are. And my fear is that we make a change just to make a change because we want to change. We end up with a situation like Warehouse Point Fire Department, and it takes us 10 years to fix that. So I'd rather not make a change just to make a change. Another concern I have with continuing to vote till it passes is other towns do that. And if you read the paper every year, and I can't name which ones now because I'll probably get them wrong, but there are towns that it does drag on. And if you talk to anybody that's in finance, for a town. It's kind of one of the worst things that could ever happen is to just let this thing drag on. It's very disruptive to the operation of the town. So I'm not really, I don't think that's a great idea either. If we do go that route, though, I think we should start earlier and compress the budget season as much as we can and start it as early as we can, because there will be years that it will go on and on. So I guess some of the stuff I was thinking about before, and I'm, by no means do I have all the answers, but I was thinking that there was, we could raise that cap and at least get a little bit more out of it than what we're getting now. And then I also thought, and I guess I don't know why we didn't follow that, but I'm assuming there was a good reason why we didn't follow the idea that we would remove CIP and debt service out of the cap. I'm not sure how that would work out, or if it's even possible, but I'd like to see that as an option. So I guess we certainly can do something, and if it fails, it's just going to end up at the 2%, and certainly 2% isn't getting us where we want. But I think that we shouldn't let ourselves just think that if we get rid of it, we're going to get what we want, because the evidence is we're going to get not what we want so far.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so as I look at what's come up from the commission, what the commission discussed over time, and what we've heard from the public, there are a number of options to consider. The first and most present one would be the recommendation from the Charter Revision Commission. So what I'd like to do is just straw poll members of the board and see if there's people who are interested in which of these options. And if you are, you can vote for more than one of these. If you're not interested in them, I'm trying to eliminate some stuff from the discussion here so I can find a consensus point. Is there anybody who, I'm sorry, Marie, go ahead.
Well, I don't know what you're going to read. Maybe I should wait, but I'm listening to what everybody has to say. And Alan made a point with other towns, and I've followed the news like you, and there's been some, maybe the thing is to take and say, okay, the 2% is not working. The keep on voting could cost us more money than what we have in the budget, because it's a lot of money to do a referendum, and if it goes on and on and on, we're spending money that in some cases we might be actually losing based upon the increase that they've changed. Maybe we shouldn't just change the percentage. I know for a while there was talk of a 3%. Talk of a 4, somebody talked about a 10. Maybe we could do something in the middle to eliminate what your concerns are, Alan, but also eliminate my concern of that 2%, because that's not doing anything for us. So that's what I want to throw out there. I'm willing to compromise because I think both sides have good arguments.
Okay. So one thing came up both in the public hearing and in our discourse that I just want to offer as a correction. And that's what happens if the referendum process were to continue into the new fiscal year. My understanding is the statute allows for what's effectively a continuing resolution, so the town's businesses can continue to operate until the budget question is resolved. So it effectively operates on the most recently adopted budget until there is a conclusion at the referendum process. So whereas that may take enough referenda to get into a new fiscal year, it's not like the lights get shut off or the schools shut down when that happens, or if that were to happen. There's a process that's provided in statute that allows for that to continue. So that I just wanted to offer that as a point of correction. One of the things that I've heard, and I think this was more on social media really than anything, although somebody in the public hearing earlier made the same point, that we would have, if we were to follow the course outlined by the Charter Revision Commission, we would effectively be canceling the public's participation in the budget process. And I think that it's important to consider that the process that we currently have already does that. By having a set number of referenda and then a final determination that's pre-prescribed, that effectively is vetoing the public's role in the budget process as well. So there really is no difference between the status quo that we have and what has been proposed by the commission in terms of respect for the rights of voters. We already don't respect them in the process that is currently in our charter. So this really is not doing anything any more of a disservice than we've already been doing for the last decade. So if the intention of the group is to really empower all of the voters all of the time, it seems to me that the most obvious solution to that is to remove a concluding point in the process and just have referenda run until the voters adopt a budget by referendum. If the intention is to have a budget document in place that is the most sensible by which to govern, then that would be the so many referenda, and then we're just done with this approach. But we need to look at that percentage number and say, is this really enough to meet what the needs of the community are, as it has been pointed out by a number of other people in the public hearing process? Or does this board want to make a recommendation to the commission that they strongly consider an option that hasn't been as thoroughly vetted in the public dialogue as those other two possibilities? So again, I'm going to come back to kind of this little grid sheet and try and get a sense of where the five of us are. In terms of the recommendations from the Charter Revision Commission, is there anybody who, or just show of hands, would you consider that, would you consider supporting that in concept? I'm seeing one. That's it? Okay. Oh, I'm seeing two now. All right. In terms of adjusting the final percentage number and making something that's a bit more governable, replace the 2% number, is would show of hands if you would consider that. I'm seeing 4. Okay. In terms of running unlimited referenda until the voters ultimately adopt a budget to govern by, raise your hand if you would entertain that. I'm seeing 2.
Is there a way to raise my hand halfway? I'm just going to raise it a little bit. I mean,
it's fingertips. Fingertips.
I'm mildly open to the idea.
I don't know what to do with that, man. It's like I'm half in.
All right, so I'll talk about it.
It's binary.
Okay, I guess I'm in for purpose of discussion.
All right.
Count Alan and I as 1.
Okay. Other ideas that had been floated, I think Sarah suggested the 2% plus inflation. And I know that this is something that the commission had considered and for whatever reason didn't advance. But amongst the 5 of us, would we consider a 2% plus inflation? Okay.
Jason, can you tell me what they are?
I'm not going to, we're not voting, Peg. This is really just trying to get a sense of where I want to bring the conversation.
Okay.
I'll tell you that for an unlimited number, there's 3. For a change in percentage, there's 4. For a charter, for following through on the Charter Commission's recommendations, there's 2. For a 2% plus inflation, there's 2.
Okay. Sorry, that was the one I missed.
Yep. And then the last option that I think Alan raised was to remove CIP and debt from the 2% rule and keep the 2% as is. Who would be open to that as a possibility? I'm seeing 3. Oh, guys. All right. So it looks to me like the 2 that we can kind of rule out just based on this straw poll is the 2% plus inflation and the recommendation from the commission, which leaves us in the position of having to recommend something back to them. So I'm going to cross those out. And And we're going to really come down to that discussion between whether we want to run unlimited referenda or we want to leave everything status quo except pick a different arbitrary number than is currently in place with the 2% arbitrary number. So where do we go from here? Somebody want to argue the pros and cons of the, I mean, I think we've done it. We've talked about these. So it's just a matter of what we want to try and recommend. Who was that?
I think it was just somebody joining the call.
Okay. So I had a pretty strong reservation, I would say, to the unlimited referenda.
I think my concern with the unlimited referenda is it takes out the fail-safe.
Yep.
And I know that the 2% was put in to limit rather than to save, but it ends up working both ways because, I mean, you could get a 1, you could get a 0, you could get a -1, you could get a -2 with the right board. But I mean, it does change the dynamic, and I don't think we really fully understand how our voting population would react to that and how it would change the conversation. Because, our conversation now is arbitrary, and so it's almost by rote what we're going to do every year. And it's, we follow the same pathway. We put out what I think most Board of Finances think is a responsible number. Then it gets rejected, and then they cut it a little bit, and they cut, and they know that they're going to 2 at some point in time. So it's almost like you say, it's almost kind of written into it. And so taking away the 2% does take away the fail-safe, which is a concern of mine, but it also may change the dynamic. I don't know. I mean, I'm projecting that it could go bad, really bad for us. Just because our voting history in this town is basically no. But I could be wrong. I'm no fortune teller. So it might change the dynamic completely if people know they're in this to the bitter end until we all agree on something. Maybe something good could come out of it. I don't know. My fear is that it would not be that way.
So here's where I see that fear, and Charlie, I see it, but just I got 2 points I want to interject here. Here's where I see that concern bearing out is if there is a particularly anti-group that's elected to the Board of Finance. Because absent that, there's nothing that would compel the Board of Finance to keep cutting below any benchmark when we have the referenda that are running until it's ultimately adopted. There's nothing that's pushing that towards a negative. They could decide that they increase it. They could decide that they want to run the same budget again in hopes of a different voter participation. That's one of the upsides about the referenda till it passes approach. But I'd also share an anecdote, and maybe this is kind of a counterpoint against myself here. But I'd share an anecdote from the town manager of South Windsor, who formerly had been the town manager of East Hampton, Connecticut. And I was at a meeting with him once, and we were talking about governance structures, and I shared with him that we have this 2% rule in our charter. And he said, man, I would have killed for that in East Hampton. And I said, what? Why? He said, because we have run referenda until we're in the negative. So there is anecdotally in a different community evidence that it can and does happen. But there's nothing that would force the Board of Finance, other than wanting to be done with the process, having been burned out from endless meetings over a period of time, from trying to find to Mr. Leach's point, a number that could be popularly agreed on. Charlie.
My point was going to be part of that as well, that to add to Alan's concern, yeah, you could run referendums and, our Board of Finance typically doesn't increase the number from one referendum to the next. They go down. That's just how they're designed to work. And just like what you just said, we could just keep going and going until we get into the negative numbers, and then where would our town be? And then I had another point too, and now I lost it. I lost it, but if I think of it, I'll come back.
Okay. So at this point in time, before we continue our dialogue, we need to allow the Charter Revision Commission to convene their meeting and then recess that and then pick up our business and finish it because they're noticed for 8 o'clock. So I'd ask for a motion to take a recess from the Board of Selectmen.
Make a motion to go into recess for the Charter Commission meeting.
Selectman Nordell will second that.
The motion is to go into recess to allow the Charter Revision Commission to convene. Selectman Baker?
Aye.
Selectman Nordell?
Aye.
Selectman Muska?
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza?
Aye.
Board of Selectmen meeting is in recess at 8:01 p.m. Rebecca, would you please convene and then recess your board so we can keep going?
Okay, it is 8:01. The Charter Revision meeting is called to order, and I would entertain a motion to recess our meeting to continue the Board of Selectmen meeting. Do I have a motion from a charter member?
Move to recess.
Motion made by Rick. Is there a second?
I'll second it. Second.
Heather seconds. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Are you and I? Okay, all of us are in favor. You may go, Jason.
Thank you. That's just some housekeeping stuff so that we stay street legal. I'm going to reconvene the meeting of the Board of Selectmen at 8:02 p.m., pick up the conversation where we left off. So I think we were talking about the merits of the pros and cons of an unlimited process. We've heard from Alan and Charlie. Ladies, do you have anything to add? Marie?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with Alan, and I think that keeping it going on and on, he's right. That could put us in more harm than good and defeat our purpose. I'm looking at it from your perspective. But I did have a question on the second option that Alan had, by taking out those two items from the budget. Can that be done?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
I mean, completely off. I think the timing is off to do that and do that properly, or
That would be a pretty substantial change. That would certainly require legal review beyond the time that we have in order to move this to the presidential ballot. So we would need to make a determination as to whether our goal is to make some sort of a modest improvement, no improvement at all, and still hit the presidential ballot, or tap the brakes and say, let's take a more holistic review of things.
so I don't want to tap. I don't want to tap. I'm sorry. I don't want to tap.
Go ahead.
Good. I don't want to tap the brakes at this point. So I'm leaning towards what would be the percentage to increase that, to eliminate the two and go up higher? What would that, something that would be acceptable to the public? Because I think if we go with the keep it going, there's going to be a majority that's just going to say absolutely not, because they want the 2% and they don't want it to keep going because they're going to be afraid that they're going to get an 8% budget increase or 7% budget, which is really unrealistic, because I think the Board of Finance keeps it within reason. So what fail-safe, as you call it, Alan, should we be looking at? Should we be looking at 3%? Should we be looking at 3.5%, 3.25%, 3.75%, 4%? I wouldn't go any higher than that, because then it certainly wouldn't go through. But we can't continue with the 2% and do this town justice.
I think there are two examples that come to mind with other instances of similar circumstance. The first is what Massachusetts does with Prop 2.5, which is a 2.5% cap on municipal spending increases. The second is what Governor Rell proposed in her budget in, I think, 2009, which was a statewide 3% municipal property tax cap. So those are two real world examples that have been at least discussed, if not implemented, that are different from what we have here. Do folks have other examples? Those are the two that come to mind most readily.
No, and I think, you know, there's, if you look at it, like 3% is, you know, not a ton of money into the budget, you know, so it's not changing the world for the town or for the Board of Education, but it's a little bit more money that you can work with. So, I mean, if you're just looking to do it from a responsible government standpoint of how we're going to be able to, you know, keep things from falling behind, you know, and just say, okay, well, what do we need that percentage to be? You know, I think that's the kind of the minimum to make a difference and not be continuing to fall behind. And then there's the, you know, and I know the commission talked about like setting it to like an arbitrarily high number to 8, and I'm not suggesting that, but you know, if you think about the psychology of that and how that changes the dynamic of the voting, if you were to go with another number, like say 4, you know, it leaves the people the ability to, you know, I think it would make people stay engaged and say, all right, well, maybe I do like this 2.75. Maybe I do like the 3. You know, I don't know how that. I'm just kind of trying to think through that and think out loud. I think that 3 is, if you're going to stick with an arbitrary number, which may or may not be good. I personally feel like it's a fail-safe. Then 3 gets you somewhere, and then you can look at something else if you're trying to affect, to engage voters, basically.
Charlie?
I've thought those same ways, or, you know, that Alan has too, is to, you know, how would that effectively affect the way people vote? You know, if we set, you know, a high number, you know, and then they saw, you know, a 2.5% increase on the first referendum, would they all run out and vote yes? You know, because if we get to 3, they're going to look at an 8% or 5% or 4 or whatever. And it has its pros and cons. What my question is, though, is that if we set another arbitrary number, say 3, is that really enough to change the problem we're having with bonding and debt services? Is that really going to help us in that regard, going up by 1%? Or do we need to go to that higher number so that, you know, bonding wise, we're not capped?
So what if we were to say, just following that thought, what if we were to say that if the budget were to fail 3 times, it would go to a 3.5% increase, with 1% being dedicated to capital projects? I'm not sure that gets us there, but that's, you know, I'm trying to think about your point, Charlie, and how to develop that. But, you know, if we were to take, so we try and have the target anyway is to have CIP be somewhere between 2 and 3% of our total budget. So if we were then to take a more generous spending increase, but earmark some of that specifically for capital or infrastructure projects, that gets us there. But it's the same holds true with debt service and paying down enough of our debt service quickly enough to allow us to bond, because CIP has nothing to do with why we can't bond. It's the limit in the budget for debt service preventing us to take on. We have, I want to say it's $14 million in outstanding bonds right now. We have debt capacity of more than $100 million, but we can't access that delta because we can't afford the credit card payment, because there's just not enough room to flex in the budget. So I wonder if there's a way of tying some of the requested money to those more infrastructure-based projects.
And another thought I had, but this makes it confusing, I think, was that if you implemented some rule where if the budget failed 3 times, the Board of Finance had to go up in their next proposed number or something along those lines. And yeah, people would argue, well, that's, deceiving or confusing, but everybody knows now how it works and how the system works, that we revert to 2%. And that if we fail it 3 times, we're going to get that 2% number, which we can all seem to live with. I was just, spitballing the idea of what if after 3 referendums, the Board of Finance had to go, to a higher number than they originally started with, rather than continuing to go lower. But again, that was just an idea I had, and personally, I just kind of thought it was confusing.
So following that line, if we were to take the 2% number and turn it to a 3% number or a 4% number, or pick the number, and after 3 referenda it reverts to that, the check on the board going all kinds of crazy is that the boards are elected, and voters ultimately will encourage us, whether it's the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance, to take a sharper pencil and try and get to a more appropriate number that could be adopted at referenda. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking about if it was a 3%, it's not to say that we're going to keep going up, because voters will expect us not to do that, and I think rightly so. So there's that influence and that pressure, on elected officials to make sure that we're trying to be representative of the people we serve, knowing that ultimately the process needs to come to a close. So if we were to do a percentage, what's the right percentage?
I think when we've passed budgets recently, I mean, it was a couple years ago, it was right around 3, a little over 3 that passed. And I think that's happened a few times. So it seems to me like that's like the maximum that people in this town would kind of go for on a regular basis. Although, I mean, I think there are more people that would like to, see 4% or whatever. I know some people were looking for 5% this year. So I don't know. It seems to me like, just from time that I've spent on the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen, like you can't really progress as a town. You can't even keep up, let alone progress. You can't keep up, and that is evidenced by our, well over 5 million that we need to bond of projects that are just like, why are they stacking up in a pile like that, right? So I think that we found that the 2% obviously isn't making it. 3% doesn't quite get you there, but it definitely puts you back in the a little bit more of a solid footing. At least I guess at that point in time you're not falling behind as quickly. But I still don't know what kind of room does that give you with debt service, and which is really, I mean, CIP is important, but debt service is really the number that we need to fix, right? Because compare CIP with debt service, or at least a good portion of it. So like, does the 3% even do that? And then the other question that kind of struck me while we're talking about this, if we take away the fail-safe, there's no cap, then how does that affect debt service in any situation, say a budget passes at 1% or whatever? I mean, can you then just do what is needed to be done with debt service?
Well, no, if the budget passes at 1%, the budget is what the budget is. And wherever the money is that passes is that's what we live by.
So I think a fail-safe is still in order.
So if you,
from a responsible government, and I understand that people, people think that they want more. Well, that's great, but bring your voters. I haven't seen it yet. But on the other side of that, we still need to run a town here, and we got to stop the bleeding somehow.
So if you were to use, well, under the current circumstance, our 2% rule is about 800 grand. If you were to just look at, up until we made the conversion this year, what our healthcare costs were going up every year, that was somewhere around $300,000 a year, every year. All of a sudden now, of that 800,000, you only have 500,000 left. That's before the Board of Ed has to pay for their health insurance increase, which is going to be more than that. It's pretty clear that there's not extra money kicking around at a 2% level. If you go to 2.5%, that 800,000 goes up by 200 grand. If you go to 3%, that 800,000 goes up by 400 grand. Also thinking about just those big costs that we have limited control over, and wanting to, after you get through those things, wanting to have something left where you can still do something meaningful for the community. You need, I think 3 is the number. I think it's got to be, I don't think it can reasonably be much more than that. And I don't think it could reasonably be much less than that. That seems to be, just as you look at what drives our budget and what we're left with, that seems to be about right without going totally afield of what, would be acceptable to the average taxpayer. But it's just an arbitrary number. Sarah, did you have your hand up? No, okay, sorry. Other thoughts or comments? Anybody want to argue for a different number?
I'd like to go a little higher, to 3.5.
I would agree with Marie.
That's a spending increase number. That's not a tax increase number.
Right.
That's an important piece to make sure we're educating people about, is that if our town continues to grow, if we have good economic development, then that 3.5% spending increase may accompany a 1 or 1.5% tax increase, which is a lot different. As it stands right now, with Gravel Pit Solar and the Silverman Group, assuming nothing changes there, that would equate to 1.5% of the 2% spending increase next year in new tax revenue. So we would have a 2% spending increase, but a 0.5% tax increase, just based on nothing that's happened other than economic development. Now, we can't do that every year, and that's not something that's realistic to sustain, year after year after year. But I think it shows that if we're talking about the spending increase, we need to be talking about the spending increase. If we're talking about something else, then we need to be very clear and articulate in what we are asking people to consider. So Charlie and Marie like 3.5, Sarah and Alan?
Do you want to go first, Sarah?
Sure. Sarah Muska, Selectmen. I share the concerns with everybody about the 2%. I'm just concerned again that we're just picking a percentage number out of thin air without a formula or without a basis or a reason. I don't know. It could go either way on it. I mean, honestly, the difference between the 3 and the 3.5, is it going to solve our issue with the debt service? Is it going to solve our issue with the CIP? Like, what is the actual difference of that percentage? And what's the basis for it? So when constituents ask, we have a reason as to why we picked this, not just because it'll make it a little easier for growth. And, I just wish that we had an actual basis and actual reason as to why we're picking these numbers. But I mean, I do agree that the 2% really has hindered us and we need to move forward. I just wish that it was on an actual basis or a formula as to why we were picking it. So that's my hang up right now.
So to answer your question, the difference between a 3% and a 3.5% is roughly 200 grand. Every half a percentage point is about $200,000. Now, so every half a percentage point is $200,000. The budget is split 60-40 BOE to town. It should be more than that, but it's 60-40 town. It should be somewhere around 65-35, but we just don't do that. So what's 40% of 200,000? That's 80 grand for the town, 120 for the school. So what is the town government going to do with $80,000? Not a hell of a lot. That's not a position. That's not a program. That's, we're probably looking at CIP for that. That's going to be 2 extra cruisers or a plow truck or something. What's the BOE going to do with an extra 120 grand? Maybe that's a teacher and a para. Sarah.
I wasn't really asking the math part of it. I was just asking, why aren't we picking 5? Why aren't we picking 4? Why aren't we picking 3.25? It's the basis as to what we're thinking as to why we would want to go with this number. It's like just picking 2.5%. I don't know if I'm being clear, but it's just a basis as to why,
Well, I understand that now. I think that I think if the commitment is going to be to some sort of a stopgap in the process, there also is a recognition that the current stopgap is inadequate to meet the needs of a growing community. So trying to figure out a number that would allow us to meet those needs without being unacceptable to taxpayers. At some point in time, somebody introduced like it should be an 8% or a 10%. I don't remember what it was. It was huge, and basically that's pointing the gun the other way. Instead of saying, well, we're only going to get 2%, you're enticing people to vote for whatever else is out there, or else get saddled with an 8% increase without necessarily having a good idea of what you're going to spend 8% more on. So I think what we're trying to get to with the number that, whether it's 2.5 or 3 or 3.5, is something that's a little bit better than it is now, still has that stopgap, and is hopefully acceptable to voters as a reasonable percentage, recognizing that 2% hasn't gotten us anywhere in a decade.
Yeah, and I would say that, although it seems like sort of picking a number out of thin air, it actually, it means like $1.2 million. So like in this year, when we had to start kicking in more money for the pension because they changed the life expectancy model and everything. And then if Jason hadn't have done the deal with the state insurance plan, there would have been another 800,000 or something. If those two things come and bite us again in another year, well, pension will bite us again next year because we only bit off half of that this year. We're gonna have to bite off the other half next year to make that right. So that's where that extra money means you can pay that off and you don't have to take it out of CIP, which is what would happen in these cases, right? We can't do it. We're gonna have to take 2 cruisers, or we're gonna have to take put off Broadbrook Fire Department, SCBA's again, that's what the difference is. It makes it, and is it a lot? Is it life-changing? Is it, is it moving the town forward? No, but it's stopping the bleeding. We're not falling further and further behind in those things. And we're going to get hit with those in the future, just as much as we have in the past. Pension, just grows.
Selectman Nordell, for me, picking the 3.5%, I'm hoping we're never there, to be honest. To me, it's like pointing the gun the other way. I'm hoping we're never at 3.5%. Hopefully our Board of Finance comes out with budgets, that are below that, and we can stick to keeping tight budgets. But at the same time, if it continues to fail, at least it's going to put us in a positive direction, or at least hopefully a positive direction, rather than this negative direction we've been going for so many years.
So just to illustrate what we're talking about, if a homeowner this year is paying $5,000 in property taxes, which is pretty close to what I think the average in town is, next year at a 2% budget, they would be paying $5,100. At a 3% budget, they would be paying $5,150. So the difference between 2% and 3% for the average household is $50. Is that going to be true for everybody? No. But if you're looking for a benchmark that you can try to figure out, where we are. Now, the difference also is you're still paying the $5,000 on top of that. So it's not like it's a difference of $100 or $150. There's the first $5,000 that's going to sting. But in terms of if there's going to be this stopgap where the process is going to end, what we're talking about now is a difference of $50, based on the ideas that have been circulated on the table.
Which is one less Dunkin' Donuts coffee every 2 weeks.
It's one way to look at it. And again, back to the wishful thinking idea, right now, if nothing changes in our electorate and we put out a budget next year, in that range, it could very well, the people that are voting no because they want to get to 2% may just decide, we're going to vote for the 2.5 and make sure that happens because we don't want to end up with 3.5. So it's not a guarantee that your taxes will go up or the spending will go up by 3.5% every year. It just changes the conversation and the dynamics a little bit. And it potentially would change, it could hit the fail safe, but I'll bet you what would happen is we would hit the fail safe less often, because I think what we'll end up with is something more than 2 and less than 3. Unless people, want to come out and vote. I mean, right now, I hear a lot of people saying, over every year saying they want to spend more on the schools. Well, they don't come out and vote though. They just want to, apparently, because it doesn't happen. So I don't think that it's not necessarily if we were to make this a 3.5% spending increase after if 3 failed, that it would happen that way every year. It may still end up to be a 2, 2.25, 3, or it could be a 1.5, depending on the Board of Finance that's in there. So it's just changing the dynamics a little bit, and then if we do hit the fail safe, we're not perennially messing ourselves up.
And it's not a windfall either. The objective here is for it not to be a windfall.
Right.
It's to say, okay, government needs to continue.
Agreed.
What is it going to take to do that? So it kind of sounds like, based on the way the conversation is going, that we've gravitated away from the unlimited referenda option. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not.
Okay.
I would consider it if that was the only option, but I really fear that just making things worse.
So then it looks like we're dialing in on a percentage, and one of the percentages we haven't talked about is 2%. Is there any sentiment for saying, what, this system is what it is, people are used to it, should we just keep it at 2? there anybody who thinks that's where we need to be?
I don't. I would like to see it change myself. It doesn't work for us. I think that's universal. But that's my opinion.
I think it probably is a universal perspective amongst the five of us, but I didn't want to have the conversation go on without giving people an opportunity to voice that. So if there's no advocates for 2, and I believe that would mean, anybody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would imagine that would mean there's no advocates for anything less than 2. So now we're still coming back to honing in on that magic number that allows us to continue without a windfall. Is it 3? Is it 3.5? Somebody want to make a motion?
Selectman Nordell will move to recommend to the CRC to set the budget after 3 failed referendums to 3.5% to go before the voters.
Second that.
Motion's been made by Charlie, seconded by Alan. Any further discussion on that as the benchmark number in the recommendation? No further comments. Sarah?
Like I said, the 2% has really hindered us, but I'm just not in favor of voting for just a number out of thin air without any basis as to why we chose it, and so that's just where I'm at. So I just wish it was based on a formula or actual statistics or something that I could defend as to why we chose that. I just have a hard time just picking it because it's a random number. I understand it would make things better and make progress. I just have an issue just going with it because just going with it. So that's where I stand.
So what type of formula would you envision as being advisory here?
Something based on inflation or based on the economy at the time or based on what's going on in this community or in the state or federally at that moment that can justify something rather than just picking a number. Because 3.5, well, why not 3.25 or why not 3.75? We don't have a basis as to why we are picking that besides just that it would improve and make progress, but we don't have an actual reason as to why we actually picked that number. And that's just what I'm having a difficult time with.
So I think we have a reason. I think what you're saying is we don't have a standard.
Correct. That's what yes, correct.
Okay, so.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
I just, Googled US dollar inflation and I probably, the commission has looked at this, to your point, Sarah, if you were to say 2% plus, I think what you had said earlier, suggested, or somebody suggested earlier was 2% plus inflation. So you kind of get, say 2014, 1.62. So then you'd get 3.62, right? Then 2015 was nothing, 0.26. 2016, 1.26. 2017, 2.13. So now you're talking 4.13. 2018, 2.49. So so it's going up. 2019, 1.76. 2020, 1.35. So I guess what and that kind of gets us kind of where we want to go, and it gives you a benchmark. So I guess I'm not against that per se, but I have a problem with inflation because it doesn't include some stuff that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't include gas or groceries or, which constantly are going up, but it does give you a benchmark and I guess I'm not against that idea. I guess I wish we would have talked about it a little bit more, but in 2009, of course, it went down a little bit, but it does reflect, I guess, where you're at with the economy. It does sort of follow the economy.
Charlie.
I agree with what Sarah's saying, but I also believe that in those times where we're in years of hardship and things like that, like we were this year, the Board of Finance looked at that and they kept that in mind when setting budgets, and that's what we elect them for. You know, we entrust them to, you know, benchmark or set the budget to, you know, a certain amount and take into account not only the needs of the community, but also the issues the community is facing. And again, you know, the 3.5 number for me is a high number. I don't want to see us there ever. I'd like to see it always below that. And again, like I was saying, it's to turn the gun the other way, to get people out there to vote and vote for that lower budget up front, instead of just failing it until we get to the 2%.
So, Alan, coming back to the statistics you were just citing, in how many of the last 10 years would 2% plus GDP or 2% plus inflation have been below 3.5%?
Twice. Well, 3.5. It would have been. Let me see. 1, 2, 3, just barely. 4, 5, 6. Again, 7 would just barely. 8, 9 out of the 10. It looks like.
So,
but just barely. I mean, like there's
3.5.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I got that wrong. It would have been about 5 out of the 10.
So half the time. Okay. Well, it kind of sounds like if it's 2% plus inflation or 3.5%, we're basically talking about the same number.
Yeah, basically.
The thing that so arguing Sarah's point, that does provide some sort of a consumer-based or government-based index that we would be able to point to as the driving force of formula behind what we're doing. But it doesn't provide that stability and surety for maybe a business that's looking to locate in the community, and they're looking for that tax stability as they're looking at that as a positive for locating here versus someplace that might have a 4% one year and a 1.5% the next, and a 3.7 the next, and a 2 the year after. So on the one hand, having an independent metric, we have a sense of pretty much where we want to go, but we don't have that. We can't market that. You know what I mean? Whereas with a 3 or 3.5% number, we could say, this is what you can expect your tax bill to do, worst case, over the next 10 years. You know, if we run into the 80s again, where inflation goes crazy, or conversely, well, actually, in the Great Recession, they did the same thing. They just turned the money machine on, and that's that. Seems like apples to oranges, or to me. I mean, we're talking about effectively the same number. It's just how we want to go about selling it. Does that seem about right?
Yep.
I would agree, and I do, and I'm glad you brought that point up, because when we were looking at this back when I was on the select board last time, got information from, and I brought this up before, I still haven't been able to find the spreadsheet, but what our fail-safe had done basically is create a very predictable arc compared to other towns on, spending increases, where, to get whatever, you get a 0 one year, but then they'd end up with a 5 the next year. And just people get the business community getting whipsawed back and forth. At least here they know, like you say, this is worst case scenario, most likely. And, it often will likely in reality be less than that because of the voter pool that we have.
Other comments on that? So there is a motion on the table to recommend the 2% be changed to 3.5%. I'm sorry, there's comments in the chat. So there is a motion to set it at 3.5%. There's also an alternative idea to use 2% plus inflation, which is effectively the same number, although the variability of it is beyond our control. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. The motion again is on 3.5% instead of a 2% after the third referendum. Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
No.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Motion passes. So that addresses the recommendations from the commission on section 8 of the charter, 8.5 of the charter. They had made other recommendations as well. Are there others that we want to discuss and recommend back to them? I didn't have any other objections. The rest of their stuff is not significant, not materially significant. Charlie, did you unmute for a reason?
Selectman Nordell, I had no objections to the other changes either.
Okay. Alan?
No objections.
Marie?
I didn't have any objections. Most of them are errors made in spelling, double things, and some clean kind of stuff that needed to be done. I don't have an issue with those.
Okay. Sarah?
I'm good. I did point out on page 27, just the changing of treasurer to also finance director. I just thought that it could possibly obligate us to pay a higher salary, but based on being more competitive with other towns and helping recruit candidates if that position were to open, I'm actually okay with that.
Okay. So we have a recommendation for the CRC about the percentage change that we would like to see. We have no other changes based on their comments. The next thing for them to do, and this is going to be a bit confusing for everybody, so I'm going to explain this and apologize for it, but there's a reason that I'm doing it this way. We are going to, after that, now that we have made that recommendation, we would adjourn this meeting. I'm going to close out this room and reopen the room. And the reason for that is so that I can, oh, actually, you know what? I don't think I have to do it that way. I think I can just stop the recording and then start a new recording and keep everybody here. Okay, so I'm sorry, that's just a Zoom thing I'm trying to figure out, but Rebecca has given me the thumbs up, so I must be good. So the last thing for us to do then is a motion to adjourn. Then I'm going to try and figure the rest of this out. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's non-debatable. Selectman Baker.
Aye.
Selectman Nordell.
Aye.
Selectman Muska.
Aye.
Selectman D'Souza.
Aye.
Okay. We are adjourned at 8:44.